Hello everyone, this is Aida Kolami from Agmasoft Research Lab, and in today's video I'm going to have a long video about t-test in SPSS. So we want to just go through all three types of running t-test in SPSS, such as one sample t-test in SPSS, independent samples t-test in SPSS, and paired samples t-test in SPSS. So I have two separate videos on one sample t-test and independent samples, so you can watch them and you could go through one of them if you want, but in here we want to go through all these three types of t-test in SPSS. But at the first, I want to give you an introduction about what we will go through. So in one sample t-test, we have we want to compare mean of the group with a standard, with a standard value, or with considered value. So with something in our mind, it could be anything. And then in independent samples in t-test in SPSS, what we will go through is to compare means of two different groups. So in here what they will do is that we have two different groups when we want to compare the mean values. So the null hypothesis is that the mean values should be considered equal because they do not have a significant difference, and in the alternative hypothesis we say that the mean values are significantly different, so that they should be considered as two different averages. And then in paired samples t-test, we want to compare mean of one group. So the emphasis is in the one. Mean of one group before and after a treatment. So we have one group, we measure the variable we want, and then we apply some changes, we apply some treatment, and then again we go measure the mean value. And now we want to compare these two data with each other, so that we understand if the mean values are significantly different before and after that treatment or not. So with that introduction in your mind, let's get into SPSS. I want to just explain from scratch, and I want to show you how I enter my data in SPSS, how I run the tests, and how I analyze the results of t-test in SPSS. So come along. I first open my SPSS atmosphere. You can see I have data view and variable view, all these repetitive informations that you can find in my previous videos. So let's get into one sample t-test in SPSS. I want to go through that. So in one sample, I just want a rand between, and I want to say create some fictional data set from 10 to 20 for, let's say, 30 data points. I just copy those data into my SPSS atmosphere and in data view. And in variable view, you can see by default it has given the name variable 00001. So I want to put it on one sample. Okay, so let's get the name of the variable. Let's say 10 to 20 packages weights. And then the type is numeric. It's okay. I do not want decimals because I do not have them. I do not want a label, and all is okay, but a measure is a scale. So it gives me an error I didn't understand. It doesn't take a space in here. So I go for pack weight. It's okay now. Okay. So now in data view, you can see I have all my data. Just in here, I go to analyze, compare means, and one sample t-test. I just have one variable. I take it into test variables, and here in test value, you should define this standard value or that considered value. Okay, so let's say I have a factory. I produce some packages. I do not have any idea that what packages are them, but I have some packages. Okay, some fictional packages, and I want to test these data, these 30 packages, to see if the average weight of these packages are equal to, let's say, 15. Okay, if the mean average, I want to see if the mean average is significantly different than 15 or not. Okay, so I go to options, and then the 95% confidence interval percentage is okay for me. I click continue, and I click OK. So then you can see the test is, is operated, and then you have some general statistics. You can see the number of your data is 30. The mean value was 15.30, and standard deviation is 3.55, etc. And then you have the results of one sample t-test. So this is the important table in here. So you can see the t-statistic is 0.46. Degree of freedom is 30 minus 1, which is 29. And then this p-value in here is something that is important. It's 0.64. So you know from before that whenever p-value is smaller than alpha, which is in here 5%, okay, whenever the p-value is lower than alpha, then the null hypothesis is rejected. So in here, this is not the case. Okay, so in here the p-value is much bigger than alpha, and so in here we should accept the null hypothesis. What is the null hypothesis here? In here, it is that the average of the group is not significantly different than the standard value. So that was for the one sample t-test in here, and let's jump into the next one, which is independent samples t-test in SPSS. So in independent t-test in SPSS, and it's much different in comparison with Excel. So when you run independent samples t-test in Excel, you have two columns of data, and then you go to data and you do the t-test. But in here, you want two columns of data. One is dependent and the second one is independent. So in here, I should go for, let's say, range between 1 and 2. So I have two groups of data, and let's say I have 60 data in here. Okay, and then I go for range between, for that same 10 to 15, and I copy it to all. So I copy these two columns of data into my SPSS worksheet, and now I should do some changes. So in the first column, this is not the package weight anymore. This is the line number. Okay, and then the second column is packages weight. Okay, what I want to do is that I now have two lines of production in my factory. Okay, so assume that fictional example about my factory that I wanted to test the weight of these packages. Okay, now in independent test, you should make this assumption. Okay, what's the assumption? It's that you have two lines of production. This factory have two lines of production. I have made samples from these two lines, and the sample size should not be essentially the same. That's the point in here. So I have made two samples from these two lines, and now I have the data. And now the first variable is line number, and the second one is package weights. Okay, now I head into, okay, so I define my variables, and then this one is nominal, and this one is scale. Okay, and then in nominal, I go for defining the values. So one is for line 1, and then the 2 is for line 2. I click OK, and that's all. So I go to data view, I go for data, I go for analyze, compare means, and and independent samples t-test. So now you should define your test variable and grouping variable. Okay, so in here my grouping variable is this line number. Okay, so I send it to grouping variable, and my test variable is package weights. So now I should define my groups. So group 1 is 1, and then group 2 is 2. That's so simple, but you should do that. So I click continue, I go for options, it's all okay, and I click OK. So then again, you can see, so this was for one sample t-test, and in here we have independent samples t-test. You again have this group statistics. So I said that your sample sizes should not be essentially the same. Okay, that's shown in here. So I have 28 data points for line 1, and I have 32 points for line 2, and that's okay. So you can see the mean values are, the same. Okay, so we could consider them the same, but we couldn't make the decision, so that we had to operate this test. So I get into independent samples test, and in here you can see Levin's test for equality of variances. So the point in here is that you should first watch for the the results of this Levin's test, and then get into this t-test for equality of means. In here, when this is so this p-value, when this is bigger than 5%, you could go for equal variances assumed. So I go for the first row, and then in here you can find the p-value again. Okay, so it's 0.20, and you could see this is, again, I go to paint. So this is 0.226. Okay, so this is the p-value, and we should compare it with alpha level, which is 5%. You can see that this is much bigger than 5%. So in here, when the p-value is not lower than that, you could accept the null hypothesis. So you do not have enough evidence to reject the null hypothesis, and your null hypothesis is that the averages of these two groups are not significantly different. So they are, they are equal. They could be considered as equal. So that's the result of the independent t-test in SPSS. So now let's go to the next and last t-test that we want to operate in SPSS right now. So that's paired sample t-test in SPSS. I said that you do that whenever you want to compare average of one group before and after treatment. So what should you do? You should have two columns of data. So I change this one. I go for rand between, and now I go for 15 to 18. Okay, so I go for that, and that's it. So now I copy that data. I copy that data into SPSS, and now the names will be different. So let's say now you have done some regulations on the settings of one line. So you have made a sample from the line 1, and then you saw the weight of the packages is not enough, let's say. Okay, so these are all assumptions. Okay, so then you saw the weight of the packages is not enough. Then you've done some regulations. You've done some changes in the production line of the factory. Okay, and now you have made another sample so that you can test if there is any significant changes happened. With those explanations in mind, let's get into variable view and change the name of these variables. So that's weight before, and this will be weight after. Okay, and then both of them should be scale, and then this should not be the case. Okay, remove this one, and that's all. So I go to data view, I go to analyze, compare means, and paired samples t-test. So I take one of them as variable 1 and the next one as variable 2. In options, I do not have anything to change, and I click OK. So then you can see the paired samples statistics is shown in here. The number of samples are equal. The averages are different. Okay, so maybe we have some significant changes in here. Then you can see the paired samples correlations. So you can see the correlation is low, so that we can see maybe these samples are so much different than each other because the correlation is so much low. And then this is the final results table, and these two columns have this p-value. The difference has shown this p-value. So this is 0. And you could remember that when p-value is lower than alpha, so alpha is 5%, and now we have 0. So this is lower than alpha. Then the null hypothesis is rejected, so that the mu's are equal is now rejected. And what is accepted? This is accepted. So these are not equal anymore. So we accept the alternative hypothesis, which is this one. Okay, and that's the final result of this paired samples t-test in SPSS. So that's it for today's video. I hope you learned something new. I've enjoyed recording this video for you, and I hope you will enjoy also when you're listening and watching this video. I really hope that you've learned something from all these explanations. And if you're curious about more videos in SPSS, you could go to ArgumentSoft YouTube channel and check all these other videos. You can check them out. And that's it for today's video. I will see you in the next videos, and bye. Have a good day.